bit ago, I made a real totem of undying using a copper alloy called Nordic Gold. And it was actually really fun. I had a really good time making it. And because I just love working with copper, what is that? I had to make something else. That's when Mojang decided to bring the copper golem back from the dead. And I knew I just had to make one. Like, dude, it's the freaking copper golem. That would be so cool. And while I could just 3D print it and spray paint it and call it a day, I'm not gonna do that. It's a copper golem, not a plastic golem. I'm actually making this thing out of copper. And what's the first step in making a copper golem out of solid copper? It's getting lots and lots and lots of copper. Fortunately for me, I knew a guy, but after reading some bad reviews, I was forced to look elsewhere. Luckily though, my parents' house was getting remodeled, so I was able to save all of that wiring and piping that would have otherwise been thrown away. Now all I have to do is strip all the cables and cut up all the piping, and I have a massive pile of copper, about 53 pounds of it. I know some of you out there are absolutely fiending for this. I can practically smell your biblical greed through the screen. Now we hopefully have all the copper we need to make the golem, but I can't just spawn one in. So first I've got to make a 3D design. I started by designing each body part of the golem individually, where each pixel was equal to a cubic centimeter, so it stayed the right size. That gave me these basic shapes. I then added the important pixel art details so it actually looked like a copper golem. To do this, I looked at the details and decided that if a pixel was darker, that meant it had more depth on the design. And by doing that, I got the details down pretty good. I also added a space behind the eyes, which will be important later. And then I made a way for all the parts to come together, using ball joints for the arms and these pins that would slide into each other for the other parts. And oh yeah, the rod? That's right. It goes in the square hole. Then I scaled the parts up to maximize the amount of copper I collected. Now we have the designs of 7 parts that will make up the copper golem. And I kind of lied a bit earlier, because before I make it out of copper, I do actually have to make it out of plastic. And to do this, we get to pay a visit to our good old friend, the
Wait, what's this? Well, it's the goddamn clean machine! Whoa, now featuring a glass build plate and 90% less dust. Now you can make terrible time lapses in style. Seriously, how do you mess these up so badly? Get yourself a clean machine and make yourself a plastic golem today.
Well, at least the prints are done. But it wasn't easy getting here because I had so many failed prints. I picked probably the worst time to switch to a new slicer, which I had no clue how to use. And on top of that, the new glass build plate, for some reason, gripped onto the prints with the strength of 1,000,000,000,000 lions. And those failed prints sucked because I spent a pretty penny on a special filament to do this project with. Oh yeah, I gotta tell you about that. This stuff is called polycast, and the thing that makes it cool is the layer lines can be smoothed with isopropyl alcohol, and it doesn't leave ash behind when burned out in a kiln. And that's because I have to make the molds for these parts in a different way than I made the mold for the totem, because a lot of these parts have details that need to be precise, or details that would be missed if we only took a mold of 2 sides. So then how am I going to make the molds? Well, let me explain. This is Todd. Todd wants to be a copper casting, but we can't sandcast Todd because of his details. So we're going to have to use a method called ceramic shell casting. First, we 3D print a copy of Todd out of polycast plastic. Then we use isopropyl alcohol to smooth away the layer lines. After that, we attach a wax piece called a feeder to it. Then we coat it in a layer of ceramic slurry and put a coating of sand on it to add thickness and strength. We let it dry and repeat several times until we have a thick shell. After that, the wax and the print are burned out and the shell is hardened in a kiln. Copper is poured into the shell, and after the shell is broken and the feeder is cut off, we have a perfect copper copy of Todd. Just look at how happy he is. Now that you know how this is gonna hopefully play out, let's get to smoothing the 3D prints. To smooth them, I decided to use an alcohol vapor chamber, which is pretty much just a fancy way of saying a plastic bin and some paper towels. I then gave the paper towels a good spray of alcohol. Alright, prints are all ready for the alcohol chamber. I've got them on, not going to believe me when I say this, I have them sitting on staples.
Because I didn't know what to use to hold these up. So they're just on staples right now. Oh my gosh, the alcohol is so strong. I have got to open a door. Doing this in a secluded garage was not the play. I don't know why I did this. Prints will be nice and smooth though, so I'm hoping that turns out nice.
Did the 3D prints come out smooth? Yep. Did I forget to record that? Absolutely. But I did get them smooth enough where you couldn't feel the layer lines at all. This will help massively when it comes to polishing them up. So now that I'm done using chemical warfare on my garage, I can finally get these molds made. Only one problem though. I kind of don't really have the special sand or ceramic slurry. Shouldn't be an issue though. It's practically just a bucket of mud and a pile of dirt. Can't be that expensive. Can't be that expensive. Yeah, I was right. It doesn't actually cost that much because more than half of this cost is just from shipping alone. But you didn't come here to listen to me complain about the price of fancy dirt. So I got looking. And I looked and looked and I couldn't find anything. And just when all hope had seemed lost, a local bronze foundry agreed to help me make the molds. So huge shout out to Adonis Bronze. This video would literally not even exist if it wasn't for them. When I got there, I got to meet with the president of Adonis Bronze. Really cool, really nice, and really experienced in metal casting. But when I showed him the 3D prints of the Golem parts, he said something that made me question if this project would even be possible. So these are the parts of the project I've been working on. I'm planning on casting them out of solid copper. That probably won't work. These parts are too big. If you try to cast these solid, they'll just be unrecognizable due to shrinkage and pitting. For those of you that watched the totem video, you might remember what happened the first time I tried to cast it. It got a huge hole in it due to shrinkage. And what the president was saying is that might happen to these parts, but even worse. He said that I could fix it if I redesigned the parts to be hollow, but I couldn't do that because I wouldn't have enough polycast from printing the other parts. This was a bit of a slap in the face of reality because not only was I trying to do a casting method I'd never done before, it had to work first try 7 times. But after a bit of talking, we came up with a plan. I would try to cast 2 of the smaller parts, and if those worked and it didn't crash and burn, I would have the green light to do the other parts. But if they didn't work, I would be forced to stop the project altogether. So I got to work. For the 2 parts, I decided to use one of the legs and the rod. First, I jammed a square piece of wax into this big bell-shaped piece of wax. This would be the feeder. I used the soldering iron to melt the top of the square piece of wax, and then I quickly stuck the rod on it. Then I used the soldering iron to melt the edge of the wax to seal the gaps between the wax and the print. Then I just did the same thing for the leg. And now, it was finally time to do the one thing that was holding this project back for so long. It was time for the ceramic slurry. I start by giving the model thing, I don't know what to call this, a good dip in the slurry. The slurry used in these first dips has way finer ceramic particles in it, so it can capture the details much better. I use a paintbrush to get the slurry in the little details that might have been missed in the first dip. Then I give it another dip, then I give it another dip. Then I give it another dip just for good measure. and it gets a good old shower of silica sand. After the model things dry for 24 hours, they go back for one more dip of fancy slurry and a sand shower. Now that we have the 2 coats of detail capturing slurry, we get to move on to this green, oopy goopy thick slurry that makes the shell thick and strong. And instead of a nice shower, they get shoved head first into the pot of sand. I did this until there were about 3 coats of the thick stuff in sand, and this took about a week. To finish the shells off, I give them one last dip in the slurry without using the sand, just to seal them up. Now the shells are almost done, but before I can fire them in the kiln, I have to burn out the wax. This part was really satisfying. When all the wax was burned out, I heated up this metal rod and just jammed it into the 3D print. It felt kind of weird destroying something I'd worked so hard on, but I had to do it so that when the print is burned out in the kiln, it doesn't make the shell explode. And this seemed to work pretty nicely because about a day later, the shells were all fired and ready for casting. Only one thing though, you see how massive that feeder is? And yes, it does actually need to be that big if we don't want history to repeat itself.
Huge freaking hole in it.
And even though the parts I'm casting are pretty small, that's still a lot of metal to pour at once. And the furnace I have right now could barely melt enough metal to pour for the totem. And some of these parts are much bigger than the totem, and that's still without the massive feeders they need. So it's time to show you why the ceramic slurry was out of my budget. Wow. Okay, nice.
Got crucible lifters.
Oh, that thing is not small.
I can't even get it out.
Whoa, look at that. How nice is that? Okay, look at that. We got gloves. Ooh, the burner. That's very important. This is the refractory cement that we paint on the inside. Oh, this is the gas adapter. That's what this is. Look at that. Devil Forge. They're goated. They're peak. And here, look at that. Look at that. That is big. Nice, big, and it's making me look like I just spent 10 hours drawing. That is so much bigger compared to the old one. I'm gonna have to show you. I had to paint this rigidizer stuff on the inside of the furnace, and that took 24 hours to dry. Before I start melting the metal, I have to preheat the ceramic mold to get the moisture out of it. So I tossed it on the grill and cooked it low and slow over propane at 700 degrees for an hour. At about 30 minutes into the preheat, it was time to melt the copper. Eventually, I had enough molten copper in the furnace to pour the first part. There was a million things that could go wrong here, and I was really, really nervous. Well, that seemed to go okay. Let's do the other one.
Holy crap. That is heavy.
Well, both the rod and the leg are poured now, but we're not in the clear yet because I won't know how they turned out until they've cooled. And after the slowest 24 hours of my life, it was time for the big reveal. What I see when I break these open will make or break this whole project.
It looks good so far. Dude, that looks perfect.
Hold on.
There's no way.
That's actually freaking beautiful. Whoa.
I am shocked.
I am shocked too. There's no pitting, there's no... Bro, and you could see the layer lines in the top that didn't smooth. That's crazy.
It is not doing shiz. I feel like I'm gonna hit my hand.
Me too. Ah.
Sorry.
It opened.
Yeah, it did.
Hold on.
Uh-oh. Is that a detail or is...
Oh, that's a detail.
Oh, okay.
Bro, that's like actually perfect. Oh my gosh. That's like actually perfect. Oh my gosh.
That's crazy.
Bro, nah, that's so good. Brother, that's perfect.
They're freaking beautiful. And you might be thinking, no, that looks like poop from a butt. It's not copper colored. Well, yeah, right now it's covered in an oxide layer, but we'll just polish that off later. Next thing I did though was I cut off the big feeders to remelt to use for the other parts. And because these first parts turned out so good, that means we can now start working on the other parts. So let's get to it. After the shells were good and fired, I gave them a quick blast of air to get any bits of ash or debris out of them. And up first for casting is one of the biggest parts, the body. This part is so big that to fill both the body and the feeder, we need a whopping 9 kilograms or about 20 pounds of copper. This means I need to use both my furnaces at the same time to have enough metal. Well, looks like the dual furnace setup worked. And just look at that angry red glow from the hot copper. But if you thought that the body was big, then buckle up because the next part is the head. To fill the feeder and this absolute monster of a piece, we need to pour 10 kilograms or almost 22 pounds of copper. For this, I decided to enlist the help of a friend so that we could pour both crucibles at the same time.
All right, up. All right. I start pouring. All right, stop. Perfect.
Well, the pouring went smoothly, but I'll have no freaking clue how they turned out until I open them. For all I know, they could be perfect, or they could be covered in huge pits and holes. Guess we'll just have to find out.
Slight issue right there. That one didn't even form. Well. If that isn't beautiful. Okay, so look at that. Pretty. Body looks beautiful. Oh, my foot. Hey, look, it made it into the feeders. That's good. Oh.
I don't know anything about it, but in the video, my colored copper is a completely different color than your colored copper.
Eye time.
I am shocked with how well these turned out. They look amazing, and now that the two biggest parts are out of the way, it should be smooth sailing, I hope, with the two arms and the leg. With both the arms done, I only have one part left, the last leg. It feels kind of fitting that the last part is a leg because the other leg was the first part I made. Almost like I'm finishing right where I started. We just gotta hope everything goes right for one last pour. Well, that looks pretty right to me. Just gotta hope that they look fine when I break them open.
Ow, that really hurt. Ooh, looks good. Beautiful arm. That's very nice. Very beautiful.
With all the parts cast, it's really starting to come together. But right now, it's kind of looking like it decided to pick a fight with a warden. So to clean it up, I used a sandblaster to get off that ugly oxide layer and the ceramic shell that was still stuck on it. Now that looks like a copper golem, and it's only going to get better from here because it's time to polish it. This is where the way I designed the details really starts to shine. Literally. Because remember how I made the dark parts of the golem texture deeper on the design? That made it so I could easily polish the higher and brighter copper colored areas and leave the lower and darker areas unpolished, so they're darker. For that, I used an electric sander and 3 different grits of sandpaper, 220 grit, 600 grit, and 1000 grit to give it a beautiful finish. And you're gonna hate me for this, but I'm gonna leave the way it turned out a surprise. After using probably the most annoying tool ever, I printed these using a flexible filament. These will be used as resin molds to make each pixel of the eyes for the golem. I was originally gonna do these matte color matched eyes, but I thought they looked kind of weird, so I decided to go with these more exaggerated and transparent colors. Because these are going to look a whole lot better with lights behind them. Yep, that's what the space behind the eyes is for. The eyes will be lit up with 2 yellow LEDs powered by coin cell batteries. And I swear, every time I go to solder something, I always forget just how much I suck at it. Because what do you mean that I spent 7 minutes trying to get one wire on this switch just for it to break off camera and make it so I have to resolder the whole thing? But nothing could have been more annoying than designing these little things to hold the eyes and electronics in place. All right, I got my design. I'll just print them out and we should be all good. Okay, I guess I'll just make them little okay, you know what? You're getting a whole freaking wall.
Dude, what's up? I'm gonna stop working now.
After all that, though, I finally got all the electronics in place and the pieces for the eyes all glued up. Well, that's it. No more last things to do, no more ifs, ands, buts. That's everything done. And it feels kind of weird because it took 4 months to get to this place. All the electronics, all the bits of the eyes, every single last 3D print, all the polishing, it's finally done. I've finally made a real copper golem. I am so happy that it turned out as good as it did. And for those curious, the golem weighs about 37 pounds and it's about 30 centimeters tall. And that's about 1 foot. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'm so glad I could share this project with you. I had such a blast making this project, and I am so glad I could share it with you guys. And I hope you guys like it too. If you guys want to see more stuff like this, please let me know. I have such a fun time making this stuff. I have some of my own ideas already, but please do share them if you have any ideas. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I just want to say a bunch more thank yous. Thank you guys so much for the support on the totem video. It really means a bunch. I'm so glad you guys liked that as much as you did. Also, thank you so much for the president, or his name is Gary, at Adonis Bronze. Like, literally without him, this project wouldn't be possible. Thank you so much to the people at the mold department at Adonis Bronze. You guys were such a blast to work with, and you guys were so helpful. And thank you to everyone else that helped at Adonis Bronze too. Everyone there was just such a good time to work with. Also, thank you to channels like Robinson Foundry and Lundgren Bronze Studios and Lunar Burn Studio. These are all channels that do metal casting. I had never ever done ceramic shell casting, so these channels were such a huge resource. So definitely go check them out. I'll have them linked in the description below. But again, thank you so much to you guys. I really love you all. Thank you for being so supportive, even with my terrible upload schedule. But yeah, I will see you in the next one.
Wait, that's a good idea.